expert from General Electric, Hewlett Packard, and a number of other large corporations. He specializes in machine learning, product innovation to accelerate business growth. He's got a passion for big data, analytics, and the Internet of Things. Gary's also a winner of 4 GE Innovation Awards in healthcare informatics and software as a service / big data analytics offering in energy. He created major businesses for companies like Compaq, Hewlett Packard, and General Electric. And now he is with Sentient Energy, a company recently acquired by Koch Engineered Solutions. Gary's here today to explore with us, what do post-COVID business models look like for your company? Good morning, Gary.
Welcome. Good morning, Saurel. I don't know if I can own up to all that you said, but anyway, we'll live with it. I guess we wanted to talk about the post-COVID world. So show of hands for those of you who have got your cameras on. How many of you are anxiously waiting to fast forward so that we can get back to how things were? Well, I've got news for you. I've been speaking to a bunch of people out there, and we are living in what is called the new normal. Life as we know it will never be how it was 6 months ago. That doesn't mean that I'm the prophet of anything negative here. In fact, it's an exciting time. To quote Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. What does that mean? We are, oh my God, in a crisis that is unparalleled in the last 100 years. From a business perspective, this is a rare opportunity amongst all this crisis for us to think about how will the world be different? What could we do differently, right? So I've actually facilitated a panel last week and learned a lot from the panelists with me myself. So much of what I say here is what I picked up in discussions with many of my esteemed colleagues around the world. First and foremost, we are redefining supply chains. What does that mean, right? For 30, 40 years, in a bipartisan basis, many Western worlds found a way to move their manufacturing and other skills to low-cost countries in order to continue to make their commitments to their shareholders. And in many cases, what we did was found one supplier fairly far away from us. What we have now found in the last 6 months is it's a moment of rude awakening. Supply chains got constrained. If our primary supplier didn't get constrained, the supplier to the supplier got constrained, right? So how do I make this real for you? For example, reagents is the reason why testing couldn't scale for COVID-19. And where do the reagents come from? ... Right? PPE, where does protective equipment come from? You know, where are those manufactured? So on and so forth. So as we go think about a new supply chain, we are now thinking about regional supply chains rather than one center, one hub shipping all over the world. We'll be looking for one in South America, one in Europe, one in North America, one in Southeast Asia, etc. There is a thought of regionalizing supply chain, so we build in more resiliency to that supply chain because we need far more responsive supply chains, not putting, no pun intended, all our eggs in one basket. So that's one thought process there regarding supply chain redesign. That's an opportunity for us to take a look at. This means jobs for many regions, including North America. Second, and this is a natural one for all of us to think about, how many of us have actually gone down for a sit-down meal in a restaurant the last 6 months? (50-50), right? At great risk to ourselves and society, and to find ourselves in a restaurant where there's literally nobody around us. I actually chose a restaurant where there was nobody around my family. Why did I bring that up in the context of customer experience? How is retail going to redefine itself? How is retail experience going to redefine itself? How will we evaluate products and services? How will the fashion industry evolve? How will the clothing industry evolve? How will the shoes industry evolve? So when we talk about customer experience, there is a tremendous amount of excitement regarding try and buy at home. Is it possible for us to have a try and buy experience at home? How do processes need to change for Molly, for you to say, I got this suit, doesn't look nice, I'm going to return it in 3 to 4 days. And it's got to be as easy as going to the mall, or at least easier compared to what it used to be, right? So retail organizations are thinking not only about frictionless delivery, which is easy. Frictionless delivery basically means business should be booming for any of the e-commerce companies out there. And yes, they are. UPS is doing well, Walmart.com is doing well, Amazon's doing well, so on and so forth. But that's remote delivery, even delivery through drones. But how does customer experience evolve? A lot of restaurants are beginning to now live with the new normal, which is pickup, right? People drive by, place an order, come pick up, and then go right home. That is how we want to dine in. It's changing how we look at customer experience and how do we manage that. There are some industries for whom this is much harder. Let me not sugarcoat that. Hospitality, travel, vacations, much harder. It's way more difficult for them. How do we figure out? Because if you really want to go to the beach, you want to go to the beach. Yeah, you can say a beach is a state of mind. Not really. There is an ambiance, there is a weather, there's an atmosphere around it, but is it really safe to go to the beach? No, it's not. So it's challenging for us to rethink customer experience, and some things are going to be different because we learn new tools and techniques in order to help people delight us, even at home, in trying and buying what we like, which is one of the great benefits of going to a mall. Malls themselves are under pressure, right? But there is this thought of regional warehouses that is, again, coming back. Can we have multiple warehouses in major cities rather than one big warehouse in Seattle or Arkansas, as the case may be? The third thing is productivity. And I wanted to kind of talk about that for a second. This is fairly intuitive, Giovanni, Saurel, that you might say. There was this notion that productivity means I have to wear my clothes and go into work, wherever that office was. You talk to most people right now using Zoom or Teams or WebEx or what have you, your video conferencing of choice, or even education itself. The hours are actually longer, not shorter. We actually put in more hours at work. Productivity is actually increasing, not decreasing. Why? We are doing less of that wasteful thing, which we Atlantans call caught in traffic. Nobody's complaining about, oh my God, 400 South, Monday morning. Saurel's smiling there, right? So yeah, we are redefining productivity. We actually have 2 more hours in the day. And I'm being generous for those of you who have longer than 1 hour each way traffic jams, right? Productivity has been redefined. Do we need those office spaces? What is the right amount of time you go spend in the office? What about teams? What about teaming? What about the culture of, hey, we need FaceTime? Oh, no pun intended. I'm not talking about the Apple software, but I'm talking about FaceTime with each other, right? So people have the courtesy of switching on their videos. Increasingly, more and more people feel comfortable switching on their videos. Why? You can relate to the person on the other side. So these are things that we are thinking about and saying, oh my God, how is productivity going to change? And the notion of monitoring and measuring productivity has to change, because people are spending more time working harder from home wherever it's reasonable. There are those, and I will shout out to my industry being one of providing the critical grid infrastructure, keeping those electrons flowing, keeping those lights on. Why? If there wasn't lights on, if there wasn't power, there would be no video conference. So we are a bedrock industry called critical infrastructure, just like healthcare, right? In order to do that, some of our extremely brave linesmen and lineswomen have to be in harm's way, have to wear their hard hats and their uniforms and go out there taking care of power lines, making sure that the power lines are clear and the equipment are operating safely. And a particular shout out to many, many of these first responders in California and Oregon and Washington. I was there 3 weeks ago and I've seen the devastation firsthand, but oh my God, I haven't seen it. I haven't lived it, haven't experienced it. The first responders, the fire rescue, the human rescue operations, and the electrical infrastructure that is being absolutely devastated by the wildfires there. Critical infrastructure people are unfortunately still held to the same metric, which is if you're not there face to face, there is no productivity. Why? You gotta keep that infrastructure up. And the same thing goes for those of you in healthcare and life sciences, the nurses and the doctors and the medical technicians and the lab workers. Productivity for them is more of the same and a bigger challenge during these tougher times. So just 3 ideas for you to think about. And in my industry, as we think about the electrical grid, challenges are becoming more intense because a lot more is being asked of people who protect that critical infrastructure and grow it during these extremely difficult times, but at the same time, one where we are seeing, for example, more solar, more wind, more batteries, more electric vehicles threatening to come on the grid in the next 5-10 years than ever before. So we are seeing that green revolution, that clean revolution that people want, which is going to increase the complexity of our electrical grid. And that is an exciting thing for us. How we thought about the distribution circuits, how we thought about the electrical grid is changing. It's going from what we like to think about is unidirectional grid to a bi-directional grid. So some thoughts, some ideas to have you think about, hey, how is this change? How is this crisis affecting and thinking me and helping me redesign my business model? Because in the end, that's what Saurel wanted me to talk about, is how are we redesigning the new business models for those companies that will find a way to redefine parts of their process, some of their process, and parts of how they think, and deploy virtualization technologies in order to still stay competitive and deliver higher quality now at an even lower cost than before. So let me pause there. I think I've taken my share of about 10, 15 minutes, and I'd love to hear some questions from you guys. Saurel, Giovanni, over to you.
Gary, thank you so much. Now, one thing that strikes me is even though it's clearer than clear that this is the new normal and things aren't going to change, there are many businesses and individuals who are probably going to be really sticky. It's like, oh my God, it's gonna change, right? So could you summarize in terms of the business models you see that are going to be effective going forward? So for small entrepreneurs, for solopreneurs, what do we need to focus on? And what are the consequences of not making that change?
Well, let me answer the second part of the question first. It has never been more difficult to be a small business owner. Sadly true. And as it is always said, small business is the heart of the United States. Small businesses is what keeps the United States going, right? As small business goes, so goes the prosperity of this country. So many of these entrepreneurs that I see on the screen and on the phone and otherwise are figuring out, what do I need to do? The good news is it's not too much. The good news for all of us is we are being asked to do only 2 or 3 things. First and foremost, wear a mask when in public. Raise your level of sanitization, right? Wash your hands, sanitize your hands, and try and avoid physical contact as much as you can and not be in crowded places. And oh, by the way, the third social responsibility we're being asked for is if you're not feeling well, maybe if you're sneezy or cold or something like that, if you feel like you may have some symptoms, stay home. Not only do yourself a favor, do society a favor by being a responsible citizen. Why do these 3 things matter? Because there are so many small businesses that are just putting these sanitization stations out there. And as you do that, it's possible for you to attract business. I'll give you an example of one that I use. I have a local hair, barber. I don't trouble her much nowadays, as you guys can see. It's an easier and easier job for her. Like Saurel, but it's hard to keep up to it. But regardless, for me I clearly don't have the skills to self-groom. But for me, when I go to her, she's wearing a mask, and then I'm wearing a mask. And with that extra level of sanitation, I'm able to support her, keep her business open. So for me, that's what is being asked, Saurel, of small businesses, is to do just a little bit more from a sanitation distancing perspective, wherever reasonable. And as we trust in each other and understand that we're not just in it for ourselves, but for an extended sense of humanity, I think small businesses will find a way. They always do.
Yeah, and the consequences of not shifting and doing so, you mentioned that you didn't want to be doom and gloom earlier, but I think the consequences of not shifting and shifting quickly are actually pretty dire. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm an optimist. I go by science. 4 weeks ago, there were 3 clinical trials that we're talking about. 2 weeks ago, there were 7 we're talking about. As we speak now, there are 9. So I believe in the scientists. I believe in the clinical trials process. These are extraordinary people working on science that has been proven for years. I think in the next 6 months or so, and I'm no Dr. Fauci, don't take my word for it. I believe in the next few months, you will see a significant vaccine availability that will help us overcome what we have had to go through for the last 6 months. I'm an optimist.
Well, I joined that club too. Giovanni and others, questions, comments? Thank you, Gary.
Yep.
Thank you, Saurel. Thank you, Gary. One of the first thing I want to say, Gary, is when I grow up, I want to be like you. Your eloquency, your ability to move the conversation, to be a contribution for us was amazing. I was like, man, how many books am I still missing to read to catch up with Gary? So thank you for being here, Gary. It's just phenomenal, right? I felt like I was getting an MBA with you.
Thank you.
I was wondering, I don't know if you have some thoughts on this, but I'm going to ask you a question based on what I do. As you look at, there's the aspect of small businesses, and then maybe a little bit bigger than teams of 5, right? Maybe teams of 10 and above. There's an aspect of shifting your company, right? Requires certain change, which everyone is kind of dealing with. In your line of work, in your experience, changing, having people shift their mind towards change, there's a lot of resistance around that. How do you manage, or what have been your practices or your way you think when you're shifting the behavior of many people inside of one organization? How do you manage that conversation?
Wow, Giovanni, that is an MBA question. That's a hard one. No, look, I think change management is extremely hard. I have always believed that you can try and do one of 2 things. You can effectively do change or be in it for yourself. Pick one.
Can you say more about that?
Successful change managers are not in it for themselves. They're in it for transforming an organization. While you hear about massive change management success stories like the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs and the Elon Musks of today, I suspect most of us who are in the business of effecting change are not going to be as successful as they are. Right? Because it's an extraordinarily difficult balancing act to get other people to change how they think and how they act. And if you force them to go do that, the irony is you're not going to be very popular. In fact, if you have read the Steve Jobs book or have spoken to people who worked with, he wasn't very popular. And I guarantee you probably Elon Musk isn't very much either. But these guys effect change. It's a truly great one, truly, truly rare, great one who's not only able to effect change, but also remain popular. So the harder question is, how do you mobilize people? I think, which is the original question you were asking for. How do you mobilize people to change? Have to be very data driven. you have to present objective information as much as you have it, not so much of, hey, you really need to follow me because I know the way. I don't think too many people are going to buy that argument. Most people are going to say, what are my options? What are the pros and cons? Let's do some game theory. Let's do some scenario analysis. Let me understand my trade-offs. And I typically like to put an X and a Y and a Z, and people typically don't want to go for the left or the right, but choose something in the middle. It's human tendency. You give them the best case scenario, give them the worst case scenario, chances are they'll reject both and go for something in the middle. So I believe the simple change strategy is to come up with the idea and then let somebody else own it. And the moment you let the people who are defending and pushing back against you own it, change happens. I don't know if I answered your question, Giovanni.
You absolutely did, actually. You actually opened up a world for my life, actually, in my practice. So I just want to say this real quick, Saurel. Gary, I really got that mobilizing people at the level of organization, at any level, right? Objectivity driven by data, it's really useful, given that the data itself is the one that people get to confront rather than my views, rather than my way of thinking things, my philosophy. But the data will be able to create a new paradigm, if you will, for people. And then when I give that data, then I give the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and then people usually go through the middle because they don't want to be dominated by anything, right? So I got that. So that was brilliant. Thank you, Gary. Go ahead, Saurel.
Good. Well,
I want to kidnap Gary and have him for the rest of the morning, and that's too good. Anyways, go ahead.
Believe me, he's been already kidnapped. Gary, thank you so much for creating this context. Andrea, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jerry. Thank you so much. This was truly, I believe for myself, what I needed to hear today on Monday. And it's to what I heard from your discussion was be present, but also be thinking about the things that you need to be changing in yourself and your business to live in this new norm. So my question to you is specifically about the people you have worked with before. What common characteristics do you find in those people that are able to acknowledge the present and be with this new norm and prepare for the future? Do you have any common characteristics in those people?
Andrea, those people are few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us hate change. Mm-hmm. Let's admit it. Who wants to change? Not me, right? So the honest answer is most of us don't want to change. We are all reluctant change agents, but lying inside each one of us is that change agent saying, what's my upside? Right? So for me, what I look for is somebody who naturally is inclined not to change, but still has that optimistic streak every morning like Saurel does, or like I do, right? Which is, we all don't want to change. Nobody wants to change. But if you wake up in the morning and say, I want to do something positive today, those are the guys who end up making a difference. As simple as that.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Rose?
Yeah, I just have a quick comment. Thank you so much. Such a thought-provoking conversation this morning. So two things that I got from the conversation with you this morning. One, when I think about the essential workers that are, keeping things going in the background for us as we weather this thing, I see a whole new level of gratitude that I can have. I mean, I completely redefined essential workers based on the conversation that we had this morning. It never occurred to me the people who keep the infrastructure in place, and particularly in areas that are being challenged like the West Coast. And I mean, there's just, oh my God, right? Or even the weather situations, the hurricanes and everything that they're challenged to do, and the ones I haven't even thought of. So thank you for provoking another level of gratitude.
Sure.
So that's first of all. And the second thing that occurred to me is, because what I do process management. with small businesses. I'm a GE myself, right? So retired after 35 years. So I do process management with small businesses. I prefer that to the process improvement side of the conversation. If you know what to do, that's a really good place to start. And being in person makes a big difference in getting that conversation started with, you know, the way I do the exercises. But what occurred to me in the conversation with you is, instead of thinking about, okay, in the face of COVID, how do I do that? Maybe what there is for me to think about is, how would this work be delivered 10 or even 20 years from now? And maybe leapfrog how I think about what changes could be made to deliver that. You know what I mean? Instead of just like being at the effect of current day circumstances, can I think past that and maybe have that be the impetus for innovation and change?
No, that's a good one, Rose. And I don't know that we know how things will be delivered 10, 20 years from now, but we get clues, right? We get clues sometimes from the simplest of places. And sometimes I honestly look for clues from Hollywood, right? As we are doing a national epidemiology study right now, we will be looking at a wellness database, right? And then creating a social responsibility norm to say, only those people are going to come, Rose, to your process management change meeting who have been approved, because in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, they have not traveled somewhere dangerous and they have maintained some level of social distancing. Right? But if they self-validate themselves on the phone and say, I'm good, and people can trust that they have done that, you can absolutely have a face-to-face meeting. For example, we just started playing some sports over the last couple of weeks, right? And we have heard this notion of a bio bubble. What is a bio bubble? A bio bubble is a controlled infrastructure where larger groups of people, then considered safe, hold themselves to a higher social responsibility and say, us 30, 50, 100 people will try and be extremely responsible, not only to ourselves, but to each other. And as we do that, we can conduct a US Open tennis tournament. We can play a game of football. We can play a game of NBA or WNBA. So if you created your own bio bubble, Rose, and you held people to that standard, you could have your face-to-face process management meeting, couldn't you?
Wow. That could actually change the whole conversation about who we work with, period, forever, right?
Yes.
We might start choosing who we work with based on who knows what set of criteria we decide in the future, right? Because now we've practiced the concept, it'll go other places.
Absolutely.
Wow. Wow.
It just holds us up to see those guys who are making that ultimate sacrifice. 2 weeks quarantine before a tournament, then a tournament, away from their families, but they're willing to do that for the spirit of, and to pursue the profession they wanted, right? They are setting a role model for us. It's not just the tournament itself, but the 2, 3 weeks before the tournament that they're willing to sacrifice in social distance. And here are people that we talk about who don't want to be inconvenienced for 6 hours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Rose. Giovanni, we'll kick it to you in a little bit to send us home. But I do want to give you, Giri, your last words through the words of Jane Bishop and those who are watching us on Facebook. Jane says, for those of us who've not learned how to shift prior to COVID-19, it will be helpful to learn how. How do you propose people who are resistant to shifting learn how to shift? Because it's essential.
Right.
What do you say to that? How do those who resist shift?
It's difficult, right? So how do we make it easier to embrace change? For each one of us, there is that built-in resistance. All I can say is sometimes it may feel like you're pushing uphill against change, but some of these changes actually make us a better society. And that's what I was hoping we can discuss here this morning. a smarter, more resilient supply chain, a smarter, a more intimate way of doing customer experience in a safe way, a smarter, new resilient grid that embraces electric vehicles and solar, right? So embracing change is oftentimes stopping being stubborn, stopping those own stubborn habits that we have developed and saying, you know what, I'm sorry I did what I did, right? And it's time for me to acknowledge that. And humility always helps us move forward a little bit more openly. Saurel, I've found that over time, being a change agent, I've eaten these doses of humility with large spoonfuls. They've kept me honest because it's not as glamorous as it's made out to be.
Yeah.
We have to always reach in for our humble side and say, you know what, I could have done that better, way better.
Well, thank you for your grace, and thank you for the immense contribution that you are to the Daily Huddle family. And
Thank you.
all of the people watching on Facebook. Jane, thank you. Norma Brown, Peter Augustus, and all of you here in the live studio audience. Giovanni, take us home.
Very good. Thank you, Saurel, Gary. This was a fascinating conversation, and the knowledge and the plethora of knowledge that you were so kind to share with us was just a breath of fresh air for me. It was a beautiful shower of possibility. And now, I have a picture of Albert Einstein and then Leonardo da Vinci. And, I have a few pictures that inspire me. I'm going to have Gary now. Gary's picture. Gary, and I don't know if you do have a book, but I'm sure it's coming up soon. I would love to know about it so we can read more of you. The world needs more of Gary.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for being here, Gary. And forgive me, I know I probably mispronounced your name more than you probably like. But thank you for being here. And for those of you who join us, thank you for being here as well. Kimberly, Mary Campbell, Karina, Joanne, Cece, Rose, Sure Girl, and those of you who join us on Facebook, thank you. Mark Ham, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m., ready to rumble. Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah.